Hi, everyone, and welcome to our podcast for Inclusive Workplace and Supply Council of Canada, or IWSCC. My name is Deidre, and I am the president and co-founder of the IWSCC. And what we do, actually, just as a quick recap, is we do our best to source businesses that are owned by veterans or by people who have disabilities, and often those two intersect. And we put them through a certification process to show that they are at least 51% owned, operated, and managed and controlled by that diverse person, one or more. And then we create fantastic networking opportunities for them. So I just wanted to say that our production today is brought to you by Remote Video. And if you happen to be watching the podcast on to YouTube, you'll see that we have ASL interpretation, and that is brought to us by Maple Communications, both of which, by the way, are businesses that are certified with IWSCC. So I wanted to introduce another business that's certified with IWSCC, and also the IWSCC's co-founder, Jeff Wilson from Adaptability Canada. And so he and I started this venture a number of years back, and Jeff has since stepped away, and but I've carried on with it. So Jeff, great to have you here. Thanks so much. Just tell us a little bit about who you are and what do you do with yourself?
Well, before I start, first of all, thank you for having me. And secondly, and probably most importantly, well done on IWSCC, Deidre. You've done an amazing job.
Thank you.
And people should know that. So
thank you.
As this organization grows and gets more powerful and more influential, that all really boils back to you. So I'm proud of you.
Thank you.
Right. A little bit about me, I guess. So I am a rabid entrepreneur. I have a disability. I'm bipolar, which means, according to most of society, I'm nuts. But that has its advantages, I suppose, at times. You get first in line most places if they know. And people usually give you clearance in the supermarket if you start, acting up. Outside of all that, I'm joking, of course. My background is in something called customer experience design. I've been doing that for almost 25 years. I've done that around the world for big brands. At one point, my work was represented in 5 of the Fortune 10, which is great. I'm very proud of that. I was very fortunate. But that work is focused on basically understanding customer need. And over the years, the decades, I switched from focusing on helping corporations build market share into focusing on corporations helping those that couldn't help themselves or were being used or downtrodden or oppressed, or, specifically people with disabilities who have been marginalized for a long time and continue to be, specifically those with invisible disabilities, like myself, like you, like millions of others in Canada. So right now our work focuses primarily on real estate and integrating the needs of what we call experiential design, which is designed in 5 distinct layers within real estate. That is the mental layer, the emotional layer, the physical layer, which everybody knows about, and the audible and visual layers. So what we do is really kind of look at how to combine this into a holistic customer experience that works for everyone, not just people with disabilities, but other marginalized or diverse communities such as LGBTQ, veterans, Indigenous, visible minorities, religious minorities, you name it. So, and we are also delving into accessible procurement in a major way. We are not experts in accessible procurement, as I like to very fondly remind people. No one is yet. However, we are building expertise in that area. Adaptability Canada is a company that has specialized in really kind of attacking these big, complex, ugly areas of business that nobody has tackled yet. And they're big and complex and hard to change. And so that's what we do best.
So that kind of leads me into...
Yeah, okay.
It'll do. Yeah, it'll do for now.
All right,
There's
cool.
more. I mean, there are a couple more questions. So I don't know if you realize that. I did send you notes, but...
Oh, I thought we were done. All
So
right.
I do want
Continuing.
I want you to talk a little bit more about Adaptability Canada, but why you started it, and why, like, you talk about your experience with the experiential design, but what were you seeing and what was happening that made you decide to start Adaptability Canada, and tell us a little bit about the progress from the very beginning to now.
Yeah, it's interesting. In the last 2 years of my marketing company, when I was there, I had a client, a single client that I was working on, which was a company called MV1 Canada, and they were the first factory built accessible vehicle. And the fantastic thing about this client was that I got to go out and meet the entire disability community across the country. And we're not talking just mobility based, which is what the vehicle specialized in, but it was every disability. And most times, someone with a disability has multiple disabilities. They'll have
Mm.
chronic disabilities or chronic conditions that are partly due to aging. They might be progressive conditions, might be episodic, but everybody really was kind of in the same bucket. Um, what I discovered was both amazing and alarming at the same time. First of all, this is a community that was genuine and authentic and pure of heart, more than anyone else I'd ever met in my entire life. I met more amazing people in that 2 years than I had in my entire life before it. I'll give you an example. I met a family where the parents had 4 kids, 3 of which had severe disabilities.
Mm.
The oldest was 10, the youngest was 2. And
Mm.
uh, their life was devoted to their children, but they struggled more than anyone I'd ever met in my entire life. Um, the father was a long haul truck driver because that's what made the most money for the family. So the mother was at home caring for 4 kids, 3 of which had severe disabilities, 2 of which were in wheelchairs. So we're
Mm.
talking severe MS, severe cerebral palsy were the conditions. Uh, she would carry 3 kids out to a vehicle, a van. She would put in 2 wheelchairs, all of the gear, just loading up to go somewhere, like a grocery store, took about 45 minutes to an hour. And then
Wow.
unloading at the store with all the kids. The 10-year-old would help the mother care for the children, but there was no community support here. There was no organizational support. All the sources were dry. Usually that helps once in your lifetime
Mm.
for a child and never again. And so one of the biggest struggles they had was with going to community centers, going to play centers, going just to a library, school. None of this was designed for their family. Um, it was, as if life wasn't hard enough for them and all the extra costs they had this on top of it. And so I started looking into real estate and how ass backwards it all was.
Mm.
That accessibility at best was a minimum. At best was solely focused on basic access into a building, and a lot of times that was even terrible or not maintained. And how after that it was really up to them. There was nothing in the workplace. It was all accommodation based. It was all, you had to
Mm-hmm.
complain bitterly and loudly for ages sometimes before anyone would do anything. And so I thought, fuck this. I can do this better. This industry needs a champion, someone who doesn't take no for an answer, and I don't, and someone who necessarily isn't afraid to tilt at windmills if it's the wrong thing, and change direction and make sure someone is championing the people, but in a real substantial way. Given the background that I had dealing with large companies and government, I knew how to um, approach them and approach them effectively to get them on board. And so founded Adaptability Canada really to focus on the needs of large property managers and owners, like the big landlords, like the big corporations who own these massive footprints of land. I mean, Loblaws Corporation owns over 700 properties across Canada.
Mm-hmm.
Not just in grocery, but in other areas. They have industrial, they have office, they have, I don't know if they have residential, but just as an example, uh, you know, um, So we decided to do that. At the time, it was a we certainly felt like a voice in the wilderness. Everything back then was focused on AODA compliance, AODA, OBC compliance. Well, that was all a minimum. And when we pointed out that people with invisible disabilities weren't represented at all, not even the slightest. In fact, some of the stuff you guys were doing was against people with invisible disabilities, making things worse. Um, you know, it was a tough go at the beginning. And for something like this, and when you have the goal of making real, substantial, meaningful change in something like real estate, well, that's not something that's done overnight. This is a marathon, not a sprint. And so we've been running that marathon since 2013, early 2013.
I had someone mention to me, a client mentioned to me, this is a few years ago now, and I loved the way he said it, and I told him I was stealing it, and I have, as you're about to hear. He said to me that code is just the shittiest building you're legally allowed to build. And I thought,
Right.
you know what? That's a really good way to put it.
Yeah. Hey, glad you could do the minimum.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Don't pop the champagne because you don't deserve it.
Yeah.
And that's exactly right. You've done the shittiest job legally you had to do. And so our job has been not to try to press people to meet building code, because we don't care about that. They have to do that. What we look at is what can we institutionalize as awareness and best practices for design around all the other stuff that's missing. Can we do a better job? And this really, we draw it back to a customer experience and an employee experience. If your goal is to earn the loyalty of customers long term in these diverse segments, then you need to walk the walk or roll the roll or whatever you need to do and get past just words and empty promises. And that's what we're helping clients to do, is really institutionalize this knowledge and then operationalize it, which is massive. So right now we have close to, I would guess, 150 million square feet of real estate under our influence, our designs across Canada. And that covers every spectrum or type of real estate there is, from residential condos versus rental units versus seniors housing versus community housing. That's just on the residential side. Then we have commercial real estate in all its forms, office, mixed office retail, work environments, warehousing, industrial, all sorts of stuff like that, to retail, which is everything from grocery stores to big box. We did work on huge format retail at one point, to small, kind of franchise-based stuff, restaurants, that kind of thing. And then, of course, there's all the institutional and government stuff, like community centers, pools, academic environments. We've touched on everything. And what we believe is that the current standards and building code is too generic to really make a difference in these environments. What it's done is basically creating this lowest bar standard that can be generically applied across all buildings. Well, unfortunately, it can't. You have to design for the use and for the people that will be in that environment. So that's where we are now.
And a couple of other things on the go that I'm going to ask you. I'm going to ask you about shortly. You talk about having a disability, and I know that often people look at the word disability and they simply see someone. I don't want to say simply, but they see someone in a chair, for example, that uses a chair to get around, a wheelchair, and that's kind of where it stops for them. But we know that disabilities are also mental disabilities, invisible disabilities. There's so many out there, and it affects a large portion of our population. So having gone through all of this experience and having a disability, how would you say that has helped you in the accessibility world and what you do?
Absolutely, and in a number of ways. First of all, I'm all about understanding the people we design for. Lived experience helps with that. But more so, I think lived experience helps me navigate the conversations with other people and build questions and engagement that really is authentic and meaningful. There is a huge stigma out there on mental disability, specifically stuff like bipolar, like schizophrenia, all the kind of more severe conditions. There's more acceptance for other things like autism because a lot of times it's about kids and nobody wants to criticize kids. Right. However, it's all words. There isn't much program support out there. There certainly isn't any support in the built environment for kids with autism and how they navigate the world. And so I think while, my life experience and the life experience of my family, which has had, it's like we're playing neurodiversity bingo in my family. But we're close to a bingo. We've got bipolar, we've got depression, we've got autism, we've got Asperger's, we've got OCD, all these different PTSD, all these different conditions. That's really kind of opens your eyes for how and your mind really to first of all, I think acceptance is the big first step. Accepting that these people with these conditions are still people and we should treat them as such. And there's a respect and a dignity qualifier there on other people to act accordingly. A lot of times people don't know how to act. So when I say I have bipolar condition in mixed audiences, there's actually sometimes a physical recoil or a step back, and which I laugh at. It's like I'm going to take a machete out of my pocket and go mental. Like I don't understand it. Hollywood hasn't done us any favors because they cast mental health in such a dramatic light instead of the 1,000 shades of gray that it is. And I think that's what we really work to understand is that, how can we really navigate this terrain effectively and represent everyone so there isn't anyone missed now, which has been the problem in the past. Anyway, I'm rambling a bit, but
that's quite all right. It's interesting, but I am going to change the topic a little bit because, as you know, IWSCC, Inclusive Workplace and Supply Council of Canada. So we have a focus on supporting our corporate members and our suppliers or anyone who's willing to listen and be interested in accessible workplaces. So what do you consider with your experience and knowledge, what do you consider to be an accessible workplace? What is it and what is it not, I guess?
Okay. Well, I would put forward that no workplace today is inclusively designed. They may have met the minimum requirements for mobility-based accessibility, but almost every workplace is going the opposite direction when it comes to supporting invisible disabilities and stuff that actually impacts productivity. Corporations are all about productivity and happy employees and are we getting the most out of them? And the answer is no, you're not. So everything from, workplace accommodation, which in most organizations is broken. If a chair takes 5 months to get to a person because they have back issues, that's not good. There is no privacy in workplaces today. There is no sound management. Most meeting rooms are fishbowls now. With the new kind of workplace design, it's so edgy and creative. Well, you know what? You're not doing yourself any favors. There's no life in the workplace, which goes to fighting depression. A lot of workplaces have gotten rid of personal space altogether, and they have hoteling, which is probably one of the worst things you can do for people with any kind of anxiety, depression, PTSD, that kind of things. Because you're creating uncertainty every single day in that person's life.
I always imagine people with anxieties racing to get into the office, like way earlier than everyone else so they can get to the place where they're comfortable. And that's not good.
No, it isn't. And what if they don't? So they're worrying all the way there. Did I get my spot? Did I get my spot? And when they get there, they're thinking, can I get the same spot tomorrow?
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
it sits like a tick in their brain and it
Yeah.
won't leave.
With
And
me.
that, right. And, having spoken to hundreds of people within workplace environments about stuff like this, uh, it's not getting any better. It's getting worse. Right now, office design is about usually one thing: saving money, lessening your real estate footprint so that you can impact your bottom line. The trade-off is employee productivity.
And employee
So,
turnover, I would think, especially with a
well, yeah,
younger.
you're not
Yeah.
retaining employees by doing this. You're actually creating an environment where employees will be more likely to leave, particularly as it becomes more competitive to find a private, safe spot. And let's talk, emotional safety in the workplace,
Mm.
because that's really what this boils down to. Do I feel safe? Do I feel comfortable working here? And a lot of times the answer is no. But people put up with it because they need the money. When a better solution comes along, a better employer who's maybe made some positive design changes in the right direction, or will allow work in a modified, space like home, or work from a cafe, or work, maybe there's ways to embed privacy in the workplace for people that need it.
Mm-hmm.
It's not being done. So until it is, and until companies realize that privacy and emotional safety and security are probably the number one determining factors in employee retention now, past pay and the
Mm-hmm.
basics, the price of entry, that they're going to keep losing people. They're going to keep seeing productivity go down. They're going to keep having challenges and people taking mental health days, more and
Mm-hmm.
more and more. Leave, PTSD leave. It's a thing, and it's something that every corporation should be concerned. If we talk about corporate social responsibility at a board level, as their commitment to the community and the environment. Well, where's the commitment to the employees? Where's the commitment at the board level to corporate social responsibility inside the organization,
In the
and
building.
making sure that these folks, that's right, in our
Yeah.
work environments, in our retail environments, and Lord knows you can't deliver a high quality, consistent customer experience without a high quality, consistent employee experience, and that starts with um, mental health and well-being.
Yeah.
Right? So,
Which,
and
a little bit
real
of,
estate's being ignored almost entirely for its impact on that.
yes. And it's not hard work, right? It's,
No, it isn't.
some color on the walls and some plants and, some strategy and surrounding
Instead of fabric
placement.
walls, how about some plants? Right, like
Yeah.
high plants that also block visual. You know, seeing dozens of people walking around and talking or having meetings 5 feet from you. Can we put some sound dampening in that's
Mm-hmm.
cheap and cheerful? Can we put plants in to show that there's actual life outside of the building? Like a lot of this is simple, but will they do it? Who knows, right?
I
It's
hope so.
it's it's not an imperative yet. Let's put it that way. So,
Yeah. Yes. All right, we're changing topics a little bit again,
oh,
kind of
exciting.
back to entrepreneurship in the
Okay.
disability community, and I'm interested in your perspective on the entrepreneurial landscape for folks with disabilities in Canada. How do you see that? Where do you see it going?
Well, I think a lot of people with disabilities are pushed into entrepreneurial ventures. I know I was.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I was you know, a triangular peg in a world of round holes. I didn't fit anywhere. My skill set was broad. Um, a lot of people didn't believe it. Um, so I made my own way, and it was hard. Um, there is barely any support out there for disabled entrepreneurs. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
what is out there is extremely difficult to get. Uh, you know, a lot, I think, of entrepreneurs struggle because they're passionate, um, and that passion makes them vulnerable to people, corporations taking advantage of them, not paying enough for what they have to offer. So I think, you know, uh, we're one of the few companies that's been able to crack that ceiling and work with major corporations. I mean, that's all we work with, and dozens of them across the country. But these small businesses don't know how to do that, and corporations are doing them no favors in the way they engage, which kind of leads into accessible procurement.
Mm-hmm.
But it's really how they see small companies. It's almost like they see them as a nuisance, as a risk to do them. Like, if I hire these people, can they actually do the job? Which should be a question they ask of any company, because I've seen big companies fail large,
Yes.
servicing other big companies, but they don't, they're not going to get fired for doing that, but they might get questioned severely for hiring a small company that screws up, but will, fall over themselves fixing it
To fix it.
and not make excuses. So there's a double standard, a vicious double standard out there in the corporate community for hiring and working with small businesses. As an entrepreneur with a disability, the government needs to be better at it. Industry needs to be better at it. Building programs, building what I call on-ramps to doing business. Getting funding, is almost impossible as an entrepreneur with disability. There are no specific funding instruments for people with disabilities.
And I know that when banks hear there's a disability, they look the other way. That there's
Right.
Here's a reason not to give you money, and so that often happens.
Right, and they'll take it every single time because they're all about risk, and they see small entrepreneurs with a disability as not just risk but big risk. Right?
Yeah.
Oh, they're unstable. Yeah. Where'd you get that? I'm more stable than you are. Sorry, I don't buy into that rationale, and it needs an overhaul, and that's really a stigma, almost a systemic bias in industry, in government, towards entrepreneurs with disabilities. And there's nothing on the horizon right now that deals with that. I mean, IWSCC is almost like an island unto itself for helping disabled entrepreneurs get on that path and find some actual meaningful help. But there's nothing else out there like this, and to our knowledge.
When we do matchmaking with our corporate members, they are always impressed, but also underneath there is a layer of surprise at how competent and relevant and effective and together and smart and organized and innovative our suppliers are. Now, we work with veteran and disabled suppliers, and often those two, as I mentioned, intersect. But it is always that kind of undercurrent after the fact. We get replies from people often saying, "Oh, wow, I mean, they were really great," and I can hear the surprise and that, oh, wow, this is a bunch of people with disabilities, and still somehow they manage to have these great businesses and be very, very successful. And that stigma gets in the way.
And maybe because they have those disabilities, they have those great businesses, right?
Yep.
I would add that the corporations should also have a good measure of shame after calls like that for what they're not doing to help this community. Sure, be surprised, be pleasantly surprised, fine. But you should also be ashamed of your stance on these companies up to this point. We've been here all along. Where have you been?
Yeah.
So, I'm I've been walked out of a few boardrooms for my opinions. I'm not going to lie. But I will speak truth to power. And this is something that the corporates need to hear is you can do so much better than you are right now. And stop with the words, put it into action. That's what you need to do, right? Because honestly, the whole accessibility community, particularly those in business, are just tired of hearing the words. Tired of it.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean anything anymore. Your words are empty. Show us action.
Yes.
And that's where it needs to get to. Yeah. Sorry. It just, it pisses me off. It really does.
No, me too. It does me as well. And, we work every day towards improving that, but it is a slow ride, a really slow ride. And I
it is. And it doesn't need to be.
No.
Right. Get the executive sponsor, get it done.
Yeah.
Put these programs into action. If you don't know what to do, well, come and ask us.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? And we will happily guide you on that path.
Yeah.
But there's no excuse now. They have the money. They just don't have the willpower.
Yeah.
If they're not doing it.
Exactly.
So what are you afraid of?
So you mentioned a little bit ago about accessible procurement, and so that's where we're kind of going to end off in the podcast, because Adaptability Canada, along with several other organizations, was awarded funding from the federal government for accessible procurement. So can you, first of all, tell us what motivated your team to apply for this funding, and then give us a bit more detail on the project? What is it, the outcome? Where are you at right now? And how do people get involved if they're interested?
Well, it's funny because so procurement itself. I've had a lot of experience with procurement over my 25 years in business. Some good, some not very good at all. But I looked at it the same way I did real estate when we first started the company. Here's an area that hasn't been touched from an accessibility point of view or an inclusion point of view. It is now, as we call it in the skiing world, because I was an avid skier, it's virgin snow, virgin powder. Here's a chance to do it right. And so we saw this as an extension of our customer experience design methodology, now applied to procurement, which is in its kind of big components. It's technology, it's process, it's policy, it's communications and data, it's relationships, and it's people. And procurement has only evolved in the wrong direction over the past 100 years. It's something that's barely changed, except to make it even more complex. And we understand why it's complex. It's about legal and financial accountability, which you need because procurement is easy to abuse. And that needs to be retained, that, powerful, kind of gatekeeper job that is procurement. However, it has gone miles beyond where it needed to be as far as complexity goes. And so what we determined is that we could do a project here that kind of mapped out for the first time procurement as an ecosystem is the best way to describe it. And even as a life cycle for relationships and how they work within the procurement ecosystem. It's identifying all the different stakeholders that are there, from internal buyers to the procurement folks themselves, to suppliers, including diverse suppliers, obviously with people with disabilities. But then we took it to the technology vendors as well, SAP, Microsoft, Salesforce, and folks like Bids and Tenders, Bid and Go, Mercs, those platforms, technology platforms that everybody uses. And then we also looked at the tier one stakeholders. These are large companies usually that have standing offers with big organizations like federal government or like banks for technology delivery or professional service delivery. These are the Deloittes, the BGISs, the IBMs, the Microsofts that do this. And what's their role and responsibility in procurement and ensuring that accessibility is part of everything they do, that it's integrated. And right now, accessibility is not integrated at all. It's barely considered. People think about it as can I read this with my screen reader? Well, it's so much beyond that. And the fact is that invisible disabilities are a specialty as a firm. And we've been researching invisible disability design for about 4 years now, hardcore internally as an ongoing project. But procurement largely deals with invisible disabilities and your ability to understand and manage and feel safe about what's going on inside procurement. And that's our focus, is to really map that out, map the barriers, not just visible, but invisible, and start to look at how to fix this giant construct, for lack of a better word. And so it's funny because we have been in communications with the Accessible Standards Canada team that's doing accessible procurement. And we've had a great conversation with them. We're looking towards more, but I believe our work will influence that standard. Certainly, maybe about how at least it's designed and implemented. We believe it should be multiple standards, not a single standard. If you do one standard, it will fail. It'll be too complex for people to understand and to apply. It'll be too expensive. Next to real estate, procurement's probably the most expensive area of the business. So anyway, that's where we are. We are looking to apply again to look at a different area of procurement that is desperately needed, which is the accessible design of services, products, and facilities. So
that'll be a big one too.
Did I answer your question, Deidre? I tend to go off on
these, you did.
Wild and wonderful tangents.
But I know that there are ways that people can get involved with this. So what would you suggest be, what are some of the ways? I guess you can describe them. And anyone wanting to get involved can reach out, I guess, to me, and I can direct people through there. So.
Right. So we are looking for partners. It's a terrible word. Contributors. How's that? To the research. So we are looking for interview subjects. We are looking for ways to build out the research findings and deliverables at the end. We are absolutely, kind of siloed in what we deliver to the government, but that doesn't mean we can't go out of it for other partners. And we're taking that upon ourselves to do. So we will deliver a very specific set of deliverables to the government, but the research is beyond that now. And this is something that we're hoping that industry and industry associations can pick up on and start to build some traction outside of government, because we can't lay it all on government's shoulders to do. The second is more meaningful, which is actual help on expanding the research. So it's more focused on solution rather than understanding, which is where we need to go. We need solutions and we need them quickly. We've got these great workshops that we've worked very hard on framing out. There's two types. One is to basically look at procurement as a whole and the more higher level issues that you may be having, or there's a deep dive, which is one that kind of gets my juices flowing, which is to look at a specific, kind of pointed problem and deal with that, understand it, right? Really kind of dig around on it and see, okay, what's the path forward here? What are the key barriers that we need to resolve? Are they policy? Are they process? Is it communications? Is it the people inside, doing something that they shouldn't, right? Or doing something that could be done better. So that's, that is a one-day workshop. There is a kind of a preparation day to that as well, which is all the kind of information analysis, like the pre-information. And then there's a follow-up, basically a report from the workshop that arms that that organization with the knowledge to go and start to deal with that problem. We are looking as well after the fact and outside of accessible procurement on a solution framework delivered by Adaptability Canada and its partners to really start to develop a roadmap for accessible procurement. And I think that's the best thing we can do right now, is develop that pragmatic roadmap that really kind of spells out, the next 6, 12, 18 months and how we can start on this journey, right? It's prioritization, it's understanding, it's getting all the right people at the table. How often is legal involved in these conversations? Because they're a gatekeeper, right? They can kibosh deals faster than anyone else. And they can also complicate deals faster than anyone else. And they're rarely engaged in this kind of dialogue. So we want to talk to them. So that's where we're going with this. There's the research proper, and we do need interview help with that. There's the expanding the research, which is all about working with real organizations to understand real challenges inside procurement. We've had a few of those conversations already. We have, a handful of large organizations looking at jumping in on that, which is great because every organization that comes in that way gives us a deeper, better, broader understanding that we can share out with everyone else, which is amazing, right? So I hope to actually kind of create this collaborative kind of joint effort where the learnings from each organization can be shared generically, obviously not giving away proprietary information or confidential information, so that it can go to help others. Rising tide lifts all boats. That's what we're out to do here. Because we can't do it alone. It's just too big.
Yeah. It's a big animal.
It's so complex. Yeah. And having people inside procurement get involved in this is so important to any kind of systemic change here. And this will be a standard that these organizations, particularly the federally regulated ones, and anyone, I would say, in the, if you look at it like an archery target, the bullseye is the federally regulated organizations. But outside of that are all the companies that do business with the federally regulated organizations, where all of these accessibility standards will be pushed down. So if you think this doesn't touch you, you're mistaken. It does. So anyway, that's it's our approach. We are a very easy company to work with in that regard. We're not like a Deloitte. We do speak very simply and directly. A lot of companies find that refreshing to deal with, but I can promise you what we do together will be very, very meaningful for your procurement organization. So.
Okay, that's some great opportunities, and you want to get involved also with smaller, like disabled-owned businesses as well, right? Like and learn from them for sure. Yeah,
because they're the reason we're doing this, right?
Yeah. So you want to hear from them also.
Yeah, and I mean, some of the stuff we're talking about in accessible procurement, I want to go to directly impacting in a positive way disabled-owned companies. And anyone dealing with intersectionality. I mean, there's LGBTQ companies, Indigenous companies, veteran companies that also have disabilities. And so this isn't just touching directly on the disability community. It's all other diverse groups as well. Disability is a layer. It's not a silo. It's a layer across all other diverse groups. So
here.
Yeah. So I think that it is absolutely on us to make sure that the disability business community is well represented within this research and what we do. Some of the stuff we're looking at, is like almost like a procurement program specifically for this group. It's a carve out of the budget they spend each year. And we're talking like 1% of 1%. Small percent, yeah. Right? They're sole source contracts that you can look at the community and start test driving a relationship. You test drive a car before you buy it. Why not test drive a relationship before you really, get them involved? So can we dumb down a contract? Can we dumb down a purchase? Right? Can it be a microcosm of procurement that is safe and inclusively designed for these folks to engage in a real meaningful way, to meet the buyers, not just procurement people, in a safe, effective manner. And these are wonderful companies. A lot of them may not be relevant to you, but maybe they're relevant to other companies you're working with. Maybe they're relevant to your tier one providers. So, that's one of the things we're looking at. I think certainly educational programs inside the corporation for their buyers and other influencers and for legal and financial to understand these companies is huge. It isn't done right now. City of Toronto probably did the best at this, where they did, kind of almost like business fairs, like open kind of forums to meet the buyers, which was great, but there was no real follow-on. So they had a good idea. It just stopped short of being meaningful engagement.
as effective as it could be. Yeah.
Right. And so I don't like to call out companies and criticize them. And I'm not criticizing the city of Toronto because they've done more than anyone else in this regard. I just think it needs to go further. And they may not know it needs to go further. That's part of the problem. Are we keenly aware of what's happening in the community and what's happening in our own procurement ecosystem?
So maybe that leads to our last question. And I want something that sort of jumps into your brain right away. But if you had the ability to make a change, right now, today, what one thing would you change? Would you like to see changed right now in support of disability, accessibility, folks with disability, that whole area? Something you could just decree and it was done. What would that be?
Like, rub a lamp and a genie pops out. You have one wish.
Yep, it's done.
Sweet.
Yeah.
I love those.
I like a good genie too.
Yeah. This is free to do. All it takes is effort by the corporation and a bit of time. Is build an understanding of who these people are and what they need at a more meaningful level. Understand them as businesses and how you can work with them. Because you keep treating them like they're big companies, and they're not.
Yeah.
And I think that the ability to develop relationships, long-lasting relationships with these companies is where I'd start. Because if you can do that, then by its very nature, you start to understand them better. You start to organically develop new programs, processes, policies, communications that are simpler, better for this group of companies and this group of people. I've always said that change starts with just understanding. And right now we don't have it. And so that's, if we were to do anything, the whole walk a mile in their shoes or roll a mile in their chair. That needs to happen. Perspective. That it boils down to perspective. Because
I'm going to have to, I'll just keep looking on the beaches and stuff where I am this summer. We'll find that genie bottle. We'll get it out.
That would be amazing. Because I do have 2 other wishes kind of preloaded that have nothing to do with accessibility or disability. Right? Especially on a day like today when it's so hot, my number one wish is for me to scream, "Hey, Kool-Aid!" And the Kool-Aid guy kind of, breaks out of the nearest wall and pours Kool-Aid for all of us. Nice, refreshing orange Kool-Aid, because that's the one I really like. Anyway, to put a funny note on the end, I guess. But yeah, I mean, and hopefully it doesn't come down to, we have to make a wish in order for this to happen. Tongue in cheek, I hope that corporations start to do this and do it right. Stop hiding and pretending that you're doing great things. Because most of the time you're not.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
well, with that,
awkward.
Jeff, I'd like to thank you for being here on the podcast. It's been kind of fun to chat with you in this format because we do see each other in other formats on a regular basis. So I really appreciate your time and your insight and your forthrightness. I think that this is something that needs to be heard. And so I appreciate that. So thank you very much for being here.
Yeah. And the next podcast, I can come on as Cousin It because I'll have, or Thing. I'll have the whole hair, I grow hair like it's my job. So I'm really like this. Not good. But anyway, thank you for having me. It's been wonderful. I have listened to some of the podcasts. I'm trying to catch up, but you've done a great job on this.
You.
So
Thank
well
you.
done, Deidre, and well done, Andrew. Behind the scenes. And I know people may not know about Andrew King, but find out about Andrew King and the great work he's doing on this remote video. All right, check them out. All right.
And thanks everyone else for joining us here today. For more supplier diversity content, you can always reach us at iwscc.ca. You can find us on YouTube, listen in on your favorite podcast platforms. We have new episodes every month, typically 2 a month, and lots more going on with IWSCC. So be sure to follow our social media, and we will see you again next time. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.